5. Furious at seeing his murderous scheme thus defeated, Ares not only perfidiously refused to give Jason the fleece which he had so bravely earned, but in his anger determined to destroy all the Argonauts and to burn their vessel. Jason secures the Golden Fleece. Becoming aware of the treacherous designs of her father, Medea at once took measures to baffle them. In the darkness of night she went on board the Argo and warned the heroes of their approaching danger. She then advised Jason to accompany her without loss of time to the sacred grove in order to possess himself of the long-coveted treasure. They set out together, and Medea, followed by Jason, led the way, and advanced boldly into the grove. The tall oak tree was soon discovered, from the topmost boughs of which hung the beautiful Golden Fleece. At the foot of this tree, keeping his ever wakeful watch, lay the dreadful, sleepless dragon, who at sight of them bounded forward, opening his huge jaws. Medea now called into play her magic powers, and quietly approaching the monster threw over him a few drops of a potion which soon took effect and sent him into a deep sleep, whereupon Jason, seizing the opportunity, climbed the tree and secured the fleece. Their perilous task being now accomplished, Jason and Medea quitted the grove and hastened on board the Argo, which immediately put to sea. Murder of Absyrtus. Meanwhile, Aeetes, having discovered the loss of his daughter and the Golden Fleece, dispatched a large fleet under the command of his son Absyrtus in pursuit of the fugitives. After some days' sail, they arrived at an island at the mouth of the river Ister, where they found the Argo at anchor, and surrounded her with their numerous ships. They then dispatched a herald on board of her, demanding the surrender of Medea and the fleece. Medea now consulted Jason, and, with his consent, carried out the following stratagem. She sent a message to her brother Absyrtus, to the effect that she had been carried off against her will, and promised that if he would meet her in the darkness of night in the temple of Artemis, she would assist him in regaining possession of the Golden Fleece. Relying on the good faith of his sister, Absyrtus fell into the snare and duly appeared at the appointed trysting place, and whilst Medea kept her brother engaged in conversation, Jason rushed forward and slew him. Then, according to a preconcerted signal, he held aloft a lighted torch, whereupon the Argonauts attacked the Colchians, put them to flight, and entirely defeated them. The Argonauts now returned to their ship, when the prophetic board from the Dodean oak thus addressed them. The cruel murder of Absyrtus was witnessed by the Erinyes, and you will not escape the wrath of Zeus until the goddess Circe has purified you from your crime. Let Castor and Pollux pray to the gods that you may be enabled to find the abode of the sorceress. In obedience to the voice, the twin brothers invoked divine assistance, and the heroes set out in search of the Isle of Circe. They arrive at the island of Circe. The good ship Argo sped on her way, and after passing safely through the foaming waters of the river Eridanus, at length arrived in the harbor of the island of Circe, where she cast anchor. Commanding his companions to remain on board, Jason landed with Medea and conducted her to the palace of the sorceress. The goddess of charms and magic arts received them kindly and invited them to be seated, but instead of doing so they assumed a supplicating attitude and humbly besought her protection. They then informed her of the dreadful crime which they had committed and implored her to purify them from it. This Circe promised to do. She forthwith commanded her attendant maids to kindle the fire on the altar and to prepare everything necessary for the performance of the mystic rites, after which a dog was sacrificed and the sacred cakes were burned. Having thus duly purified the criminals, she severely reprimanded them for the horrible murder of which they had been guilty. Whereupon Medea, with veiled head and weeping bitterly, was reconducted by Jason to the Argo. Further adventures of the Argonauts. Having left the island of Circe, they were wafted by gentle zephyrs towards the abode of the Sirens, whose enticing strains soon fell upon their ears. The Argonauts, powerfully affected by the melody, were making ready to land, when Orpheus perceived danger, and, to the accompaniment of his magic lyre, commenced one of his enchanting songs, which so completely absorbed his listeners that they passed the island in safety, but not before Butes, one of their number, lured by the seductive music of the Sirens, had sprung from the vessel into the waves below. Aphrodite, however, in pity for his youth, landed him gently on the island of Libyban before the Sirens could reach him, and there he remained for many years. And now the Argonauts approached new dangers, for on one side of them seethed and foamed the whirlpool of Charybdis, whilst on the other towered the mighty rock whence the monster Scylla swooped down upon unfortunate mariners. But here the goddess Hera came to their assistance, and sent to them the sea nymph Tethys, who guided them safely through these dangerous straits. The Argo next arrived at the island of Phasis, where they were hospitably entertained by King Alcinous and his queen Arete. But the banquet prepared for them by their kind host was unexpectedly interrupted by the appearance of a large army of Colchians sent by Aeetes to demand the restoration of his daughter. Medea threw herself at the feet of the queen and implored her to save her from the anger of her father, and Arete, in her kindness of heart, promised her her protection. Next morning, in an assembly of the people at which the Colchians were invited to be present, the latter were informed that, as Medea was the lawful wife of Jason, they could not consent to deliver her up. Whereupon the Colchians, seeing that the resolution of the king was not to be shaken, and fearing to face the anger of Aeetes should they return to Colchis without her, sought permission of Alcinous to settle in his kingdom, which request was accorded them. After these events the Argonauts once more set sail, and steered for Iolcus. But in the course of a terrible and fearful night a mighty storm arose, and in the morning they found themselves stranded on the treacherous quicksands of Syrtis, on the shores of Libya. Here all was a waste and barren desert, untenanted by any living creature, save the venomous snakes which had sprung from the blood of the Medusa when borne by Perseus over these arid plains. They had already passed several days in this abode of desolation, beneath the rays of the scorching sun, and had abandoned themselves to the deepest despair, when the Libyan queen, who was a prophetess of divine origin, appeared to Jason and informed him that a sea-horse would be sent by the gods to act as his guide. Scarcely had she departed when a gigantic hippocamp was seen in the distance, making its way towards the Argo. Jason now related to his companions the particulars of his interview with the Libyan prophetess, and after some deliberation it was decided to carry the Argo on their shoulders and to follow wherever the sea-horse should lead them. They then commenced a long and weary journey through the desert, and at last, after 12 days of severe toil and terrible suffering, the welcome sight of the sea greeted their view. In gratitude for having been saved from their manifold dangers, they offered up sacrifices to the gods, and launched their ship once more into the deep waters of the ocean. Arrival at Crete. With heartfelt joy and gladness they proceeded on their homeward voyage, and after some days arrived at the island of Crete, where they purposed to furnish themselves with fresh provisions and water.